All right, we'll say good morning. We're gonna start only because we are limited on time. So today's daf is daf Gimel. Gimel Amud Aleph. We are picking up on Beis Amud Beis, and we are picking up 2, 4, 6, 8 lines up from the bottom. So remember again, we're trying to figure out now. Thank you, Moshe, thank you. We are trying to figure out now whose opinion does the Mishnah reflect. So remember again, we mentioned that the Mishnah probably does not reflect the opinion of Sumchus, because Sumchus is the one who said that Mammon Hamutal B'Safek Cholkin Below Shvuah, that when there's doubt regarding monetary ownership, we split it up without a Shvuah. And again, that's Sumchus by the case of Shor Shenagach as Hapara. So it appeared that the Mishnah does not reflect the view of Sumchus, which the Gemara says, no. Sumchus. You could even say it's Sumchus. Ki Amar Sumchus, Shema v'Shema. We'll say, when does Sumchus say that if you have Mamon Hamot of a Safek, that you're choleg below Shvuah, that's only Shema v'Shema. When the two parties ultimately, again, who are laying claim to it, both have indefinite claim. Not indefinite is the wrong term, but not solid claims. Shema claims. Aval bari ubari lo. But again, in the case of bari ubari rabose, which is like our Mishnah, because our Mishnah shnaim ochsin betalis, two people ultimately again are muchzak in the talis. Then at the end of the day, even Sumchus would agree that there would be a shvuah. So the Gemara says, but according to Rabbi Barafuna, who says that Sumchus holds that Mammon Hamutal B'Safek Cholkin below Shvuah, even in a case of Bari Ubari. What is there to say? To which the Gemara says, "Afilu tema Sumchus, Kemer Sumchus heicha deika dra de mamona, aval heicha deleka dra de mamona lo." So we'll say, when does Sumchus say that you go ahead and you're cholik and you split up the disputed money without the shvuah? That's only when there is a potential loss, like in the case of the shar that gored the cow that was pregnant. But in a case where there is no loss, Sumchus would agree that lamaisa you go ahead and you divide up the money even without a shvuah. But say our case would be a case of where there is no loss, because the Metzia we're dealing over here with Metzia, with a found item. The Gemara says this is not a kavachomer. Ma hasam diika dra de mamona lamar, diika dra de mamona lamar. We'll say top of Gimel, v'ika lamemar kula lamar, v'ika lamemar kula lamar. So we'll say again, what do we say a kavachomer? If in a case of dra de mamona, where one of the parties, ultimately, the hasam case is the case of the ox that gored the pregnant cow, where we would say ultimately again that there is a loss for each of the individuals, so potential loss for each of the individuals, and we know that definitively the money belongs to one of the person's people, and yet in that case Sumcha says that you split it up without a shvuah. So again, kavachomer in this case over here, I will say where there is no, split it without a shvuah. Kavachomer in this case over here, where there is no definitive loss to one of the parties, lamaisi, you would also go ahead and split it up with a shvuah, without a shvuah. Sorry. To which the Gemara says, Amar Sumchos, Mamon Hamut B'Safek Cholkin Lo Shvuah, Hacha Deleka Dra De Mamona Deika Lememar De Tarbayu. Both I'm just in this inside now. In our case, where there is no concern of a loss of money for each of the parties, since this is a found object, and also in addition, it's quite possible that the object actually belongs to both of them. Lokol shekain, or the more so, Sumchus would say that you should divide up the talis without a shvuah. To which the Gemara answers, Afilu tema Sumchus. No, the truth is, you can go ahead and you can say that our Mishnah even reflects the view of Sumchus. And I will say, the Gemara now is reaching a conclusion with this. You could even say that our Mishnah reflects the view of Sumchus. How so? Shvuah zu midrabanan hi kid Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan, Shvuah zu takanas hachamis. So I will say, because at the end of the day, our Mishnah really reflects the view of Rabbi Yochanan. And it could be that Sumchus aligns himself with the view of Rabbi Yochanan. What does Rabbi Yochanan say? Rabbi Yochanan says that the shvuah of our Mishnah is a rabbinic shvuah, is a shvuah d'Rabbanan. What was the point of this shvuah? Shelo yehei kol echad ve'echad holich b'tokif b'taliso b'shal chaveiro v'omer shali. So I will say, this shvuah that we have in our Mishnah of shnaim ochsim metalis, ze omer ani mitzasiya v'kula shali, v'ze omer ani mitzasiya v'kula shali, when the Mishnah says that they both take a shvuah, that they own no less than half, and they split it, that is a rabbinic shvuah. What's the point of that rabbinic shvuah? To make sure that people don't go around grabbing onto things that are not their own. Because we'll say, what's the concern? The concern is we've already seen that when it comes to a found object, when it comes to a Metzia, it's very easy to rationalize claiming something that's not yours. Why is it easy to rationalize that? Because the mice at the end of the day, I'm not causing anyone a loss. Ruvain found the cloak. It's found money for Ruvain. So I'm going to hop onto it and I'm going to say that I own half of it. I'm not causing him any kind of loss. Therefore I could rationalize going ahead and lying. So therefore, in order to disincentivize lying, so Chazal went ahead and slapped the shvua on this. He said, if you claim that you jointly own something with someone else, you found something with someone else, you bought something at the same time as someone else, Lemaisi, you have to take a shvua in order to make sure that people are not lying. So both say that our Mishnah does not reflect the view of Rabbi Yossi. Why? What does Rabbi Yossi say? Dik Rabbi Yossi ha-amar imkein mahiv sidramai. Because Rabbi say, if our Mishnah reflects the view of Rabbi Yossi, so Rabbi Yossi says mahiv sidramai. Now both say Rabbi Yossi's case, if you look at Rashi, is lekaman Rabbi Yossi. It's the last top wide line of Rashi. Lekaman b'hamafkid shnaim shef kidu eitzel echad zemona v'zemasayim. This is an interesting case. Reuven and Shimon both deposit money with a third party. One of them deposits $100. One of them deposits $200. What happens? So ze omer masayim shali, v'ze omer masayim shali. So Rabbi say when Reuven and Shimon come to claim their money, both Reuven and Shimon claim that they are the owner of the $200. So what happens? The Ka'amar Tanakama no sin lo zemana ulu zemana v'ashar yehi munach ad sheyavo elio. So both say Tanakama says that we give each of them 100, and the third 100, the 100 that's because also remember again in this case, both are agreeing that they both own 100. The machlokes is who owns the second 100. So we give them each the first 100, and the second 100 is munach ad sheyavo elio. We leave it in Elio Hanavi escrow, right? Elio Hanavi escrow, and when Mashiach comes, we go ahead and he'll decide who gets it. Amar Rabbi Yossi, im kein mahev sid ramai, v'lama yoda, hare kibol eshalo, el hakoye munach b'yafsid ramai v'hachanami emunah. Supposed to listen to this. Rabbi Yossi has a very interesting shita. Rabbi Yossi says, here's the problem. If everybody's going to get back their initial 100, and the second 100 just sits until Elio Hanavi comes, what incentive does someone have? Was the wrong word. But how are you disincentivizing lying? Because we'll say, if I'm a liar, if I'm Shimon, and I'm Shimon the liar, and you know what, I feel I have a chance of getting that 200, why not just claim it? Meaning, what's the worst case scenario? What's the worst case scenario? Right? I don't get it. But what? He doesn't get it either, and I still get back my 100. Meaning, I'm not losing anything by lying. Rabbi Yossi therefore creates an incredible kana situation. He says, okay, two guys, neither of you could decide who's the owner of the 100. Guess what? The entire 300 is munach ad sheyavo elio. No one gets anything. If we can't decide who ultimately is the right owner of this money, all of it is put in Elio Hanavi escrow. And his lashon over there is because if you pay out the hundreds, imkein mahiv sid ramai, then what does a liar have to lose in lying? So using this logic, we would have thought that if our Mishnah, so the Gemara is saying, our Mishnah does not reflect the view of Rabbi Yossi. Because if our Mishnah reflected the view of Rabbi Yossi, then what? Then Lamaisi, what would have been the halacha in the Mishnah? Shtayim ochsim betalis. Zemrani v'tzevi kol shali. Zemrani v'tzevi kol shali. What should be the halacha? No one gets it. No one gets it. Let it just sit in Elio Hanavi escrow. The fact that our Mishnah does not say that clearly indicates to us that our Mishnah does not reflect the view of Rabbi Yossi. Ella, so the Gemara says, Hamar imke maser Ella kol yemunach shabaleo Ella mai Rabbanon. So both say, so maybe you'll have to say that our Mishnah reflects the view of the Rabbanon. Well, let's analyze this. So the Gemara says, Ella mai Rabbanon kevidam Rabbanon hashay yemunach ad sheyavo elio. So both say, listen to this. Remember, so the Rabbanon say in that case of Reuven and Shimon, they say only the third 100, the contested 100, should be put in Elio Hanavi escrow. Ha nami kishar dami desveikohi. But if that's the case, remember in our case, the talis that they're both holding on to should be like the disputed 100. If that's the case, just like the Rabbanan say the disputed 100 goes into Elio Hanavi escrow, so too what? The talis should also go into Elio Hanavi escrow. To which the Gemara says, Haimai, I amrit bishlam Rabbanan, Hasam devadai haimana dechad minayuhu, Amir Rabbani hemunachat shava Elio. So both say, in that case over there, Reuven and Shimon are both claiming the third 100. Here's what we know for sure, which is what they both say. What do we know for sure? That third 100 belongs, bless you, that third 100 belongs to someone. Meaning, one thing is clear, which is what? It's not jointly owned. it belongs to someone. We just don't know which someone it is. So when it definitely belongs to one party, and we can't be mevarer, we can't define which party, the only solution is put it in Eliyahu Navi escrow. Hacha, the ikala memar de tarbayuhu. Now remember, in the case of Shnayin Ochsim Batalis, it is possible, as we spoke about yesterday, that's what? That both own the talis. How could it be possible that both own the talis? Well, let's say pick it up at the same time. So because there's a possibility that they both own the talis, Ami Rabbanan Palgi Bishvua. We'll say even the rabbis would agree that what? That in that kind of situation, you should go ahead and split the talis with a shivua. Elai Amit Rabbi Yossi. So we'll say, therefore, again, it could be that the Mishnah reflects the view of the Rabbanan, because even though the Rabbanan hold in the case of the disputed 100, we'll call it the third 100, that Munach ad Shiyavo Elio, even though, again, I say in that case, that's because we know there's a definitive owner, we just don't know who it is. Rather than run the risk of giving it to the wrong person, we put it in Eliyahu Navi escrow. But in our case over here, of Shnayin Ochsim Batalis, where it's actually possible that both of them own the third 100, then Eina Chinami will go ahead and will say Yachloku. But if you say that our Mishnah, Bava Metzia over here, I should say in the first paragraph of Bava Metzia, reflects the view of Rabbi Yossi, Hashta Uma Hasam de Bevada Ikaman Alamar, Vikaman Alamar, Amar Rabbi Yossi, Munach Achshava Elio. So we'll say in a case where we know for sure, in at least we'll say, what do we know for sure? We know for sure, what do we know for sure? It's not an existential question. I'm saying, in this case, what do we know for sure? That both Reuven and Shimon own 100. That we know for sure. And yet, despite that, Rabbi Yossi says that we put the entire 300 in Eliyahu Navi escrow. So both in the case of Shnayin Ochsim Batalis, where what? Where it's possible that it really belongs all to one person, lo kol shekain. Then isn't that possible? Then then we would assume that Rabbi Yossi would certainly say that in this case what? Put the entire talis in Eliyahu Navi escrow. To which the Gemara says, Afilu Tim Rabbi Yossi. No, it's possible that our Mishnah even reflects the view of Rabbi Yossi. How so? Hassam, Rabbi Yossi, Gimel Amud Aleph, pretty much middle of the page. Afilu Tim Rabbi Yossi, Hassam Vade Ikaramai. So we'll say, here's the difference. In the case of Reuven and Shimon, one deposited 100, one deposited 200, and now they're both claiming the 200. One thing is clear, which is what? Somebody's lying. Somebody's lying. There is a Ramai. And therefore, again, what Rabbi Yossi is trying to do is Rabbi Yossi is trying to disincentivize crime. And Rabbi Yossi, meaning because Rabbi Yossi feels people will try to push the limits on the truth when they have nothing to lose. But Lamaisa, again, when they have something to lose, they're not going to lie. So therefore, again, we disincentivize lying. How? By going ahead and putting the entire pot in Eliyahu Navi escrow. Haha. But Rabbi say in the case of Shnayin Ochsim Batalis, maybe Rabbi Yossi wouldn't penalize. After all, why? There's not necessarily a liar in this case. How so? Ema tarvayu bahadi hadadi agvuhu. Say that ultimately, again, both of the individuals picked it up at the same time. So it's possible that when they both say, right, ani mitzasiya v'kulashli, ani mitzia v'kulashli, that's what Rabbi is saying, that they're in fact both telling the truth. If furthermore, Hasam Karnas Rabbi Yossi L'Ramai Kiechi Delodi, so we'll say furthermore again, in the case of Reuven and Shimon who both deposited the money with a third party, Rabbi Yossi imposes a fine of putting the whole pot in Eliyahu Navi escrow in order that someone will admit who the rightful owner of the third 100 is. Hacha, my psida is delodi. Rabbi say in this case over here, what incentive is there ultimately again for anyone to admit that the talis belongs to the other? As Rabbi say, in the case of the money, there's an incentive to admit according to Rabbi Yossi. Why? Because if you don't come clean about your crime, you're not getting back your own money. In this case over here, remember, this is found money. To which the Gemara says, that's fine. That's fine. Teinach Metzia, mekachu memkar ma'ika l'meimar. But I will say, that's fine. That's fine, but Lamaisa, again, that works in the case of Metzia. But in the case of Mekach or Memkar, it would not work. And Rabbi, remember, again, we spoke about yesterday that the two cases of the Mishnah, Ani Mitzasiha and Kula Sheli, are in fact two separate cases. Ani Mitzasiha is talking about Metzia. Kula Sheli is talking about Mekach or Memkar. Ella, Mechavarta Kidishaninan Meikara. Rather, I will say, we have to say that if you want to indeed make the Mishnah reflective of the view of Rabbi Yossi, then you have to explain it as we explained it before. Rabbi say, how did we explain it before? Just take a quick look at Tosis. Ela Mechavarta Kidishaninan Meikara. third line into Tosus, last two words on the line. Elahecha deika vade ramai v'isle pseida avahacha deika ramai v'leka pseida lo yikno. So we'll say what you'd have to say is like this. If you want to say that the Mishnah reflects the view of Rabbi Yossi, remember again, Rabbi Yossi is the one who seemed to say that whenever there's a possibility of lying, what do you do? You go ahead and you say munach ad sheva ilyo. Put the entire amount in the escrow. When does Rabbi Yossi say that? Rabbi Yossi says that only again where that is going to cause a loss to the parties. Because Rabbi Yossi feels that if you cause a loss to someone, you're going to cause them to come clean. So if by claiming the second 100, I'm going to lose my 100, if I'm not the real owner, why would I risk my initial investment, my initial deposit, for the possibility of regaining something else, if the whole thing is just going to be put in escrow? That's what Rabbi Yossi says, Yehimunach ad shiavo ilyo. But Rabbi said in a case where there's no psida, like in the case of Shnai Ochs and Betalis, where there's no loss, even Rabbi Yossi would agree that what? That if they both take a shvuah, they could split the talis equally. To which the Gemara says, Bein l'Rabbanan, Bein l'Rabbi Yossi, Hasam gami chen v'ni alpin kaso, diktani zen nishba v'notel, v'zen nishba v'notel. So we'll say, if you remember again, going back to yesterday's daf, we had the very interesting case of chen v'ni alpin kaso. Remember that case? That was the case where I have employees, or I have an employee, and my employee Ruvain, I tell Ruvain to go to the general store, collect his wages in the form of goods, Shimon's general store. I give Shimon $1,000, or I should say, I tell Shimon, Ruvain's going to come and take up to $1,000 of stuff, and I'll pay you. What happens? My employee Ruvain shows up, I never got any money, I never got any goods. Shimon claims that's what? I paid him $1,000 worth of goods. We'll both say, what's the halacha in that case? They both swear towards me. Well, actually, it's a machlokes what the halacha is. Or they both swear, but they both swear towards me, and they both go ahead and get their money. So I have to pay out $2,000. I paid $1,000 to the employee and $1,000 to Shimon, the storekeeper. To which the Gemara says, well, let's analyze this case. So we'll say that in the case of Chenvin Alpin Kaso, which is the case we just described, Diktani Zenish Pavanotel, and we'll say we said that both the employee and the storekeeper both go ahead and take an oath and collect from me. Maishna delo amrinon nafke lemamone mi balabayis ve'munach ad shiavo elio. We'll say why don't we apply the logic of Rabbi Yossi in this case? Somebody's lying, right? In this case, somebody for sure is lying. So why don't we say that any time where somebody's lying, what do you do? You just put the entire pot in Eliyahu Hanavi escrow. That's it. Eliyahu Hanavi escrow, let Eliyahu Hanavi figure it out. Daha bevadei ikaramai, because I will say somebody's definitely lying in this case, to which the Gemara says, Amri Hasam Hainu Taimud Amri Lechan Min Balabayis, Anishlichusa Didach Ka'avidna, Mai Isle Gabi Sochir. Afagav the Kamishtabili, Lo Mehameli B'Shus. You will say this case is different. Here's what's fascinating, and this is really such an interesting chakira in the case. You see, when we looked at the case of Chenvin Alpin Kaso, the way we looked at it is there are two simultaneous claims. The storekeeper is saying to me, "You owe me money because I paid your worker," and the worker is saying what? The worker is saying, you owe me money because I never got paid. So the way we looked at it is somebody's lying over here, right? Because obviously you have two diametrically opposed claims. It's impossible that both are correct. To which the Gemara says, but here's the difference. We don't view them as two simultaneous claims. We view them as two independent claims made against the same person. In other words, I will say, when the Chenvini shows up, when the storekeeper shows up and he says to me, listen, Silber, you owe me $1,000. And I say, listen, I don't know what to tell you, Shimon, because Reuven's telling me he never got paid. So what does Shimon say? I don't care what Reuven says. I have nothing to do with Reuven. My claim is against you. I gave out goods. You told me you were going to pay me. You owe me the money. Employee comes to me and says, you owe me money. I said, 1 second. Shimon, the storekeeper, told me that he paid you, Reuven. What are you talking about? Reuven says, I don't care what Shimon says. My claim is against you. So the way the Gemara is analyzing this is not as one large claim, but rather two independent cases. And in each case, the party coming to sue me for payment tells me, my claim has nothing to do with this other individual. My claim has to do with you. Actually, let's read that again. So the Gemara says, Amri Hasam Hainu Taima, Darma Lechan Min Balabayis. So the storekeeper says to me, I did what you asked me. My isli gabi sochir. What do I have to do with the employee? Afagav the kamashtabli, and I'm happy that he's willing to swear. I could care less if he swears. Lo mehemeli b'shvua. So we'll say, I don't believe him. We'll say, this is another incredible yisod. Remember we learned in Bava Kama that once you accept the shvua, you forgive payment. That only works if you trust the shvua of the individual. We're going to see is that there's a dynamic where, let's say, again, the plaintiff could say, I don't trust this individual. So he could swear from here until tomorrow that shvua makes absolutely no difference to me. So in this case of Yerabosai, the storekeeper says, I don't care if the employee swears. I have nothing. This is your employee. This is your problem. It's not my problem. You and I have a case to settle up. You owe me money. He goes on, Atamanti, Telo Amrli Bisahadi, Havli. Oh, well, say, listen to this. The storekeeper says to me, listen, Silber, you entrusted me. What's the proof that you entrusted me, that you trust me? You didn't make this arrangement in front of witnesses. Right? You see, if you were so concerned about that I'm not going to tell you the truth, then you should have made this arrangement in front of witnesses, and you should have made Eidos a part of our arrangement. The fact that you did not make Eidos part of our arrangement indicates that you take me at my word, and I'm telling you that I paid the guy, and Yomi $1,000. Well, so just parenthetically, by the way, you know, the Kitzer Paskins, that you are not allowed to lend money to someone without Eidim. You're not allowed to lend money without witnesses. Why? It's amazing. The Kitzer says, if you do, it's a violation of Lifnei Iver Lo Sitei Michshol. It's a violation, ultimately, again, of putting a stumbling block. Why? Because people have the Yetzer Hara to not pay back money. This applies across all races, creeds, religions, and denominations, right? People have a desire not. So what happens? If there's Eidos, I can't lie. I mean, normal people can't lie. But if there's not Eidos, I'm setting up the borrower to potential. So I will say, so here in this case, the storekeeper says, listen, Silber, you asked me to do this. It's fine. If you would have asked for Eidos, I would have been fine for Eidos. But you didn't ask for Eidos. Which means at the end of the day, you trust me at my word. If you trust me at my word, then again, I don't care what the employee does swear or doesn't swear. I'm telling you I paid him. If I'm telling you I paid him, then you have to go ahead and pay me my money. To which the Gemara says, similarly, again, we'll say when the employee comes along, he says, listen, you hired me to work. I did my work. My isli gabe chenvini. What do I have to do with this storekeeper? So we'll say, I don't care if the storekeeper swears or doesn't swear. I have nothing to do with the storekeeper. I am your employee. Hilchach tarvayu mishtabi v'shakli amalas. This both say, interestingly enough, they both take a shvur to the balabais, so both of them just swear about to authenticate their words, and they're both able to take from the balabais. Tani Rebbe Chia. So let's listen to this case. I say to Ruvain, you owe me $1,000. Ruvain says, I owe you nothing. Va'idim me'idim also sheyesh chamishim zuz. So I will say what happens. Witnesses now come along, and the witnesses testify that Reuven owes me $500. So again, remember, my claim against him is for $1,000. Reuven says I owe you nothing. Witnesses come along and say no, he owes you $500. So what's the halacha? No say lo chamishim zuz v'yeshava ala shar. So we'll say the halacha is that Reuven has to pay me the $500 based on the testimony of the witnesses, and what he has to swear about the rest. Sounds like what Rabbi say? Sounds like Modeh b'miktzos. Good. So listen to this. We'll discuss that in just a moment. V'yeshav ala shar. Shelo teodas pev gidol me'adas idim mikal v'chomer. Because Rabbi say, listen to this. One's own admission should be no stronger than the testimony of witnesses based on a kal v'chomer. We'll discuss what that means in just a moment. V'tana tuna, we have rights that supports this as well. Shnaim ochsim betalis ze omerani mitzah siha. So the Gemara now quotes our Mishnah, and our Mishnah is two people that are holding on to the talis. This one says, I found it and it's all mine. This one says, I found it and it's all mine. V'ha ha ha kevan de toughest. Now since each of the parties is holding on to the talis, Anan Sahadi demai de tafis hai didehu. Oh, thank you. Umay de tafis hai didehu. So we'll say we are like the witnesses who see that what this one is holding belongs to him. What this one is holding belongs to him. Vikatani yeshava. And I will say, essentially, here's what's interesting. The Gemara says when we walk on the scene, we being the Beis Din walks on the scene, and what do we see? We see Reuben holding the talis, Shimon holding the talis. Both claiming that the talis is theirs. I will say that is effectively the same thing as if what? As if each of them had Eidim who showed up saying that they each owned half of the talis. Vekatani Yeshava. And yet the halacha is that they have to swear regarding that half. My lab, Shalote Odas Piv Gidome Adas Edim Mikavachomer. So we'll say, so what does this mean? That in order that my own personal admission should be no greater than the testimony of witnesses based on a Kavachomer. Listen to this. Shalote Mar Hodas Piv Udurami Rachmana Shvu Ale Kidrabo. So we'll say, don't just say that it's only in a case of where one admits liability that we have an imposed shvuah on the individual. But remember again, the imposed shvuah is based on Rabbah, like we learned earlier. The Amar Rabbah mipnei ma Amar Torah mov d'mitzvah satani yeshava. We'll say, why is it that we say that if you have partial admission, right? I say that Reuven owes me $1,000. He says I only owe you $500. So what's the halacha? He has to swear about the remaining $500. Why? So the Gemara says, Chazaka ein adam me'ez panav v'fnei bal chovo. Because there's a chazaka that's what? A person doesn't lie, a bold-faced lie, right to his creditor. So if somebody lent me money, normal people can't lie and say I owe you nothing. But in reality, I would like, if I had the strength, I'd like to be able to deny the entire debt. But again, I can't. Because again, a person doesn't have the ability to really go ahead and fully deny the entire debt in the face of his creditor. So the Gemara says, but I will say, in reality, even though we just said before that I really want to deny the whole claim, deep down, I really want to admit the whole claim, because a Jew deep down always wants to do the right thing. I want to admit that I owe the money. But say, there's an incredible hashkafic yisod over here also. We see this multiple times in halacha. We see this over here. Deep down, I want to admit. We saw it in Gittin, Kolfin Osa Achiomerotza on the Kabira Plazim until it says, I want to give the get. You see this recognition in halacha, not just in hashkafa, that deep down the Jew always wants to do the right thing. Deep down we always want to do the right thing. It's just so many things in life get in the way. So in this case over here, the borrower really wants to go ahead and pay back the entire claim. So we'll say, so why is the borrower only admitting half of the claim? Because he's trying to buy himself some time. He figures to himself, what? You know what? I just need to buy myself some time. I don't have the money. I will say, it's another incredible yisod in life. So why doesn't the borrower just say, I don't have the money? Because I will say there's something called gaiva, and there's something called kavod, and something called ego, and we do all kinds of crazy things for the preservation of our ego and our kavod. So again, he could just say to the creditor, I don't have the money. And I will say, there is borrower protection. There's biblical borrower protection. Biblical borrower protection is that if the borrower does not have the money, the creditor can't necessarily pursue him under all circumstances. So, but yet, he doesn't say it, because instead what he does is he lies and he says, I don't have it. Or he admits part of it because perhaps that's the cash he has on hand, but Lamaisik, and he wants to buy himself some additional time to be able to pay off the rest. And we'll say, therefore the Torah says, slap him with a shvuah. This way, again, it'll get him to admit the rest of it. In other words, we're fine, we're happy to work out a payment plan. But what we need to do is solidify the authenticity of the creditor's claim. So now that he admitted half of it, now that you're admitting that there is a debt liability that exists, the shvuah is going to make sure that you admit to the rest of it as well. Or on the flip side, if he swears that he doesn't owe it, it frees him from liability from the rest. Aval ha'adas eidim, we're supposed to listen to this. Aval ha'adas eidim delek l'neimar hachi. So you're supposed to remember, in a case of ha'adas eidim. Now what's the case? Also, in the case of ha'adas edim, that's the case where I lent Reuven $1,000. Reuven says, I owe you nothing. Witnesses come along and testify that, look, we know that Reuven owes at least 500. We know about 500 debt. Right? So I will say, remember, in that case, the logic that we just espoused doesn't work. Why doesn't it work? Because Lamaisa, again, remember, the borrower is not admitting anything. Right? He's denying the claim in its entirety. It's witnesses who are making him chayiv half. So the Gemara says, so we'll say, I might have thought that therefore Lamaisa, again, in a case of where the witnesses are claiming that Lamaisa, again, he is chayiv for 500. I might have thought that in that case, again, he's not chayiv a shvuah on the remaining 500. Kamash Malon, Kamash Rabo said that even in the case where he denies the entire amount, witnesses come along and say, no, you're chayiv 500. That's what? He has to swear for the remaining 500. So in other words, he has to take a shvuah of modeh b'miktsas, of partial admission, even though what? Even though again he's a kofar bakal, right? Even though again there is no partial admission. That's the chiddush over here. Why? Because the testimony of witnesses should be no less strong than one's own personal admission, based on a kal v'chomer. So it says the Gemara, what does that mean? Umay kal v'chomer, umapiv she'em mechayv mama mechayv shvua. So we'll say when it comes to one's own mouth, in other words, one can't be mechayiv himself. So we'll say if one's own mouth, that can't go ahead and make him chayiv mamon. So we'll say, so we'll discuss exactly what this means. But I can't become chayiv in mamon through my own admission. Yet again, my own admission can make me chayiv a shvua. Edim shemechayiv in osa mamon. Then I will say all the more so again. Edim who could be mechayiv mi mamon, chayiv me to pay back. Enodin shemechayiv in osa shvua. I will say should certainly make me go ahead and be chayiv shvua for the remainder of the money that is owed. So the Gemara says, "Upiv ein mechayiv mamon." What does that mean? You can't be chayiv mamon through your own admission. Vaha hodas baldin kamei edim dami. We'll say it's not true. In fact, again, one's mouth is one of the greatest vehicles to make one liable money. Why? Because we have a concept of hodas baldin, that if I admit that I owe something, my personal admission is the equivalent of 100 witnesses. To which the Gemara says, no. What did we mean when we say that one can't be chayiv mammon through his own money? My mammon, knas. Also, I will say we're very proficient in this from our Baba Kama days as well. And remember again, what's the halacha? Modeh b'knas, pater. Remember again, if you admit knas liability, then ultimately you're pater. So we'll say, if through my own admission, my own mouth can't be mechayiv mi knas, and witnesses can, so certainly again witnesses can be mechayiv me a shvua of modeh mikzas as well. So the kal v'chomer would go like this. The kal v'chomer would say that my own mouth that can't be mechayiv me a knas, but yeah, witnesses can be mechayiv me a knas. So certainly if my mouth can be mechayiv me a shvua of modeh b'mikzas, witnesses can also be mechayiv me a shvua of modeh b'mikzas. To which the Gemara says, my mammon knas. Umapiv shein mechaybo. I'm sorry, I'm reading inside. Got a little excited. Umapiv shein mechaybo knas mechaybo shvua. So we'll say, if my own mouth that cannot be mechayiv me a knas, because if I admit that I owe the knas on pater mechaybo shvua, yet again my own mouth can make me chayiv shvua. Meaning, I will say, when they say my mouth can be mechayiv me a shvua, what does that refer to? That's modeh b'mikzas. That if I admit half of the liability, I have to take a shvua on the rest. Edim shemechayvin also knas. Eno din shemechayvin also shvua. Then I will say, edim witnesses who can make me chayiv in a knas certainly can make me chayiv in a shvua of modeh b'mikzas. I will say the Gemara is just trying to expand the case of modeh b'mikzas. We thought modeh b'mikzas was only a case of my personal admission of part of the claim, and now it turns out the Gemara is suggesting that when witnesses show up and say that I own part of the claim, even though I just denied the entire claim, that's also called modeh b'mikzas, because eidos on half of the claim should be no less strong than my own personal admission of half of the claim. To which the Gemara says, one second, Malipiv shekema chayvo carbon. Oh, we'll say, but you can't necessarily draw that parallelism between one's mouth and witnesses, because through my own admission, I can be mechayiv myself a carbon, right? We'll say at the end of the day, if I admit that I transgressed in a certain way, I will be chayiv a carbon. Tomar be'edim she'in mechayivin also carbon. So we'll say witnesses cannot make me chayiv a carbon. Now, this is an interesting case. Let's say somebody tells me I ate chaylev, forbidden fats. I say I did not eat chaylev. I didn't eat chaylev. Witnesses come along and say, you ate chaylev. You ate chaylev. And I will say, and if witnesses are coming along and telling me that I ate someone else's chaylev, there's a monetary claim, that's something else. Let's say they're not saying that. They're just coming along to tell me I did an Aveira. We'll say the halacha is that I cannot be made chayiv a carbon based on their statement. You could only be chayiv a carbon based on your own statement. But witnesses can't make me chayiv a carbon. So we'll say this is not a question. Why? Because Rabbi Chia holds like Rabbi Meir. What does Rabbi Meir say? Oh, because what's another kal v'chomer? Because he holds that what? Witnesses can make someone chayiv a carbon based on a kal v'chomer. We'll say, what's the kal v'chomer? Disnan. So two guys come over to Reuben, they say, Reuben, you ate chaylev. Reuben said, no, I didn't. Rabbi Meir says that ultimately Reuben is going to be chayiv a carbon based on their statement, and the Chacham Pochin. The Chachamim say no, that he's Pater. Why? Because you can only become Chayiv a carbon based on your own recognition. Amr Meir, Im Heviu Shnei Ledim Yisach Amor Leviu Ledei Carbon Akal. So Meir says to Rabban, I don't understand, what are you guys talking about? If two witnesses are strong enough to have someone executed, why wouldn't two witnesses be strong enough to go ahead and what? Have someone bring a carbon? Oh, so he says, Amrulo, so the Rabbanan said back, the Chum said back to Rabbi Meir, Ma im yertze lomar mezid hayisi pater. We both say here's a difference by carbon. Remember, by carbon, an individual always has an out. What's the out? He could say, I did it b'mezid. We both say, remember again, most carbonos for, I should say, call it, I don't know if this is the right word, infractional carbonos. Is that a word? I'm not getting any lawyer support over here. Mamish, all right. Maybe if I pay a retainer or something. What's going on over here? So again, if at the end of the day, a person wants to say, I went ahead, I violated. Yes, I ate the chalev. So and I was mazid. If I say that I was mazid, then I am pater from a carbon. Because carbonos usually only come from shogeg. So what the Rabbanon seem to be saying to Rabbi Meir is the following. That you know why witnesses can't go ahead and make someone chayiv a carbon? Because a person could always make the claim and say, mazid hayisi. So it's almost what it sounds like it almost sounds like a migo. That's what it sounds like. That since, technically speaking, I could pater myself from the carbon by simply saying Mezid Hayisi, therefore, again, I am believed when I say I did not do the act that you're claiming. That's the sheet of the Rabbanon. Elo, Malepiv Shekem Mechayvo Asham. So both say, but one second. The mouth has the ability to be Mechayv someone of Asham. To which the Gemara says, fine. Hainu carbon. We just said that. That's part of carbon. Elo Malepiv Shekem Mechayvo Chomesh. Oh, so both say, listen to this. Again, this is great because we're reviewing all of our Bava Kama topics. So remember again, we'll say through my own admission, I can be chayiv chomesh. We'll remember again, what's chomesh? I go ahead, I take a shvuah, and I lied. I admit that I lied. The halacha is, remember again, I have to bring a carbon. We're not talking about the carbon right now, but I have to pay, in addition to paying back that which I am liable to, there's an additional penalty fifth. So I will say, that chomesh only comes about in a very specific case of what? If I admit that I lied. So the Gemara says, so just like your mouth is able to go ahead and, so, malapiv she'elim chayiv chomesh. So Gemara, I want to be clear, let me go take a step back. Remember what we're trying to do over here. We're making the Gemara is making a kavachomer. The kavachomer is that if my mouth has the ability, that witnesses should be no less strong than my mouth. Right? What does that mean? That just like my mouth, through my partial admission, makes me chayiv a shvuah, so too if there's eidos about partial liability, that generates a shvuah on the remainder as well. In the Gemara, the Kavachomer essentially was trying to show that what? That eidos is stronger than one's mouth. Eidos is stronger than one's. We're trying now to deconstruct the Kavachomer by showing that mouth and eidos are totally dissimilar. You can only make a kavachomer abosai with two things that share a common denominator. But if you demonstrate that they are dramatically different, then by definition the kavachomer falls apart. So now what we're trying to show is how piv is different than edus. So the Gemara says, I'll tell you another difference. Abosai, right? One's mouth can make one liable in chomesh in the fifth, and yet Eidim can't do that. You only chayiv in chomesh if you admit your own personal liability. Halokashya, Rabbi Chia Rabbi Meir Svirle. Rabbi Chia holds like Rabbi Meir, who says that what? That just as what Rabbi said, just as witnesses could go ahead and make you chayiv a carbon according to Rabbi Meir based on the kavachomer, so too witnesses can make you chayiv a chomesh as well. Therefore, it's not just your own mouth that makes you chayiv a chomesh, is eidos as well. So we'll say we're going to stop over here for today. We're going to continue, but again, I just want to tell you where we're leaving off. I'm going to tell you. Let's just actually, we'll stop over here for today. So we'll say, one more line. Ela malipiv shekin eno ba'achasha ba'azama, because this really ends it off. Rather, why don't you say the following? When it comes to one's mouth, we'll say, one's mouth is not subject to achasha and hazama. So we'll say, what does that mean? Look at Rashi. Eno ba'achasha ba'azama, im hoda lo b'mano bo edin lechishu, lomar ein chachayiv lo klum, eno niftar b'kach do das baldik me'edim. We'll say, if I admit that I owe money to someone, and then what? Witnesses come along and testify, no you don't. And we'll say, what's the halacha? I still owe the money. Why? Because the moment that you admit something, I will say, that liability sticks even in the face of contradictory testimony. Tomar be'edim sheshna ma'achosha ba'azama. I will say when it comes to eidos, edim ultimately again are subject to refutation. If one set of witnesses say A and another set of witnesses come along and potentially refute them, that refutation would stand. So we'll say we'll stop over here. Where we're ending off now at the end of the day is that lamaisa again the kal chomer between one mouth piv and eidos may not be so clear because we've demonstrated that they are fundamentally separate and distinct. If that's the case, I will say we're going to have to go back and see where we learned that the case of where witnesses come along and testify about partial liability, how we know that that partial testimony triggers a shavua on the rest of it. That Amir Hashem will be continued tomorrow. Hurry. Skip for you. Okay, so start. Let's do this. We'll get a different one.